school book definition of a bacteria is that it doesn't have a nucleus. So a nucleus is the part within a cell which encodes the DNA, and it has a cell wall, and it's unicellular. That's the strict definition of a bacteria. It's at least 10 to 100 times smaller than a human cell. We're a multicellular organism, so we contain out of a lot of cells. The estimation around 30 billion human cells, and we contain around 100 billion bacteria in our body, in our lungs, intestines. So they are really small, one-cell, unicellular organisms which doesn't contain a nucleus, but does contain a cell wall. A bug can be an insect, it can be a bacteria, it can be a virus, it can be a person. Often the association is not so positive, so I prefer not to use the bug too much, because it implies that the bacteria are bad. So you should avoid the general terms like bug. All bacteria are good in principle, but for us, some of them might be negative consequences. But in general, the majority of the bacteria which are living on us or around us or in us, they're good bacteria. They help us, they live just beside us, ignore us. And there are only a small amount of bacteria which actually do some harm to us. If every bug, as you can say it, every bacteria is harmful, then we wouldn't exist. They don't have lungs or so, they're unicellular. So due to diffusion, just oxygen or other compounds, they just go into the cell if it's small enough. If it's big enough, they have mechanisms to take it in. They open the cell wall a bit and then it comes in and it closes again. And they breed on a special way. They can breed on all kinds of different ways, because bacteria is a really broad term for a lot of diversity in life. So there are organisms, bacteria, who don't need oxygen. Actually, quite a lot of them don't need oxygen. So they have other chemicals who they use to breathe and move. Yeah, they go, like we hear a lot in the news, in volatiles in the air. They are hanging around us in the air because they're super light, of course. But they also, some of them have a little tail, so they go in the direction of the food. They can actually sense where there is some food or some light or whatever, and they move in that direction. They mostly reproduce asexual, so they don't have typical female and male, and then they merge and get sexual reproduction. No, in bacteria it's often asexual, so they just grow bigger, they split and make two. So they divide by splitting, and they have the same genetic content in both organisms. So they're genetically identical, but they divide very fast. Some bacteria divide within 20 minutes. So within 20 minutes, you got a new organism. That's why we love working as well with bacteria in the lab, because on a day you can you let them grow to a huge amount of bacteria. Mm-hmm. So that's also has its advantages, of course. The most common nowadays, if you want to know what kind of bacteria make you sick, for instance, you sequence a part of the DNA. So you determine the ACG order, and then you can say which kind of bacteria you have. So that's the most modern way to look at it. Yeah, the microbiome is just like, sometimes they also look at, say it like it's microbial flora. It's also a really weird term, because they're not plants, they're microorganisms, they're bacteria. But the microbiome is actually the collection of all bacteria present at a certain place, like in your intestines. So then you talk about the intestinal microbiome. So the collection of all the bacteria which are present at a certain place. Not so much in the stomach, it's very acid, but there are bacteria. If you got a disease in your acid, it's often the Helicobacter kind of bacteria that makes you sick. But the intestines is, of course, very rich, because there's a lot of food. So they like sitting there. And there's a lot of surface to hang against. But also in your mouth, your teeth, your plaque to your teeth. There's a whole biofilm, a whole layer of bacteria growing on it. But also on your skin. Your skin is not very smooth. There are a lot of, for the bacteria, there are mountains. You can see it like that, and they can stay in this little pieces of your skin, and they can live on your dead skin. But also all the open places and the most obvious surfaces of the human body. So lungs, vagina, your feet. So all the surfaces that you have, there are different microbiomes present. So a human microbiome, what they say, it's a very broad term. So you can better talk about your feet microbiome if you have certain problems with your feet. They're present everywhere. In the most extreme condition, like the Dead Sea, where there's a large amount of salt there, a high salt concentration, there's still bacteria living there. In the stomach, it's really acid. There's still bacteria living there. If you keep things in the fridge, you think it doesn't go bad anymore because you keep it cold. No, there are still bacteria and other, like fungi as well. They love growing. Some fungi and bacteria love growing at really cold temperatures. But there are also bacteria which grow at really high temperatures, so close to volcanoes or desert kind of situations. They're in all places on the planet you can find bacteria. So in general, you can say that the bacteria have a cell wall, which is unique for the bacteria, which can be recognized by the human body. White cells, cells which help to protect us, they can recognize the bacteria. But also the other way around, this cell wall also helps the binding at the human cells. And if they attach to a human cell, then some bacteria actually make use of it, and they invade the cell and start breaking down the cell and use all this nice proteins and fats and all the other materials of a human cell to grow. Because the bacteria doesn't want to attack a human being, it just wants to grow, it just wants to survive. There are also some bacteria which are producing actually harmful chemicals. Most of them, they don't do it on purpose, but they just produce toxins. And some parts of the bacteria, like the cell wall, parts of the cell wall are actually toxins to the human cell. So when you degrade the bacteria, you get an inflammatory reaction and your body starts to get fever. And that's just because, this bacteria contains some chemicals which are harmful for us. First, you need to know what are antibiotics. Antibiotics are actually chemicals or enzymes or material which is harmful specific to the bacteria. So like I said, the bacteria are unique with their cell wall, and some of the components which make proteins, the ribosomes, they're also unique to bacteria. So these are targets which can be attacked by chemicals. So one of them is, like, for instance, penicillium. They prevent to make one of the cell wall components, peptidoglucan, which causes that the cell wall is not very harsh and not very stable, and it made the bacteria to explode. If you are resistant, that means that the bacteria has a strategy to attack this or to defend themselves against this attack. So it can, for instance, degrade the penicillium by an enzyme, beta-lactamase. Then it's not effective anymore, and this bacteria can grow. Or they can have special pumps where they pump out all the antibiotics, and they can actually survive because they don't have this antibiotic in their cell anymore. Or they change the antibiotic a little bit by putting a phosphate group on it. So there are all strategies of bacteria to actually survive their attack. That's why it's also very dangerous to use too much antibiotics, because then all these bacteria which are resistant can survive, and the ones who don't have this resistance, they die. And then you get a bigger population of the resistant bacteria. And then actually when you really need it, when it's life-threatening, then you got this resistant bacteria is present. So that's why in the Netherlands, actually, we're very conservative in the use of antibiotics, just to prevent that we are getting a large population of resistant bacteria. The Staphylococcus bacteria, so the MRSA, we know it all, and the MRSA stand for multi-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, I think. But some of the bacteria are harmful, some of the Staphylococcus bacteria. And some of this harmful Staphylococcus bacteria are also multi-resistant. It means that they got different strategies to defend themselves to different kind of antibiotics. No, antibiotics are really specific against bacteria. You can have vaccines against viruses, or you can have other medicines which help the consequences with the damage what the virus does. But antibiotics are specific for bacteria. You will attack also the good bacteria, you get maybe intestinal problems, and it will do more damage. So when you got a flu, you shouldn't take antibiotics. Or when you get COVID-19, you shouldn't take antibiotics. It will not kill the virus.